most convincing story that maps onto reality, and that's why the central narrative is falling apart.
Right now in the United States, people should not be walking around with masks.
We must see the central narrative for the fiction that it is. We are Americans.
While elections are sometimes messy, this was a secure election.
The founders began the fight for human liberty and self-governance, and it's up to us to finish the job.
I tell you what, we are in a truth emergency right now.
This is the end game.
All the people that have gone out there against the mainstream media and said, you're going to call us racist, you're going to call us potential Timothy McVeighs, fuck you. War.
Immensely seductive. Quite sure he's right. An obsessionally neurotic. Pretty dangerous, in fact.
Do you mean you doubt your powers to convince him?
Worse than that. What I'm afraid of is his power to convince me.
Let us never tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories.
Sweetheart, be reasonable.
All right, here we are, everybody. It is Wednesday, October 16th, 2024, the 1365th day of dystopia. I'm your moderator, Chris Paul. Let's be reasonable. And welcome to the Wednesday live stream. Here I am, here you are, or maybe you're not. You are somewhere when you're listening to this. Maybe it will be later. Some people are here. That's nice. Let's pick up in some sense where we left off yesterday. I thought about putting this clip in the episode yesterday, and then I didn't end up doing it. And then I ended up kicking myself a little bit. And so there are some other subjects related, or some other stories that I'm going to add in today that are in some way related to the case I was making yesterday. The case I was making yesterday is that we essentially have two governments, a false government layered on top of the constitutional republic of our founding. And I think that this has happened in a extended process over the last 250 years. And probably a lot of it was already in there right from the very beginning. And I think that happened during the War of 1812, during and after the Civil War, 1913 with the Fed, throughout World War I and World War II, the Civil Rights Act, and now we are in another phase of that. But the country has been essentially chopped up and delivered back to the British Crown, and by virtue of that, the global regime. I don't think that this is a bad thing. I think it's a thing that we need to recognize and understand what our history actually was so that we can avoid doing it again. I think we are on our way out. I think that we are, at this point, guaranteed victory. And I think that we just have to lead that toward its proper conclusion. And as the people, the American people, we have to actually understand these things so that we don't just allow all of this to happen again. These are preventable mistakes, I believe. So after the case I made yesterday, after the Civil War, in the Reconstruction period, through the Reconstruction amendments and the lawfare that followed, as described and outlined by George P. Fletcher, liberal, globalist, Columbia Law School professor in his book, Our Secret Constitution, An inversion of the Constitution was layered atop the constitutional republic. And that inversion changed the republic into a democracy. It took the focus off the individual and put the focus on the good of the state. And it went from freedom and liberty to equality as the principal priority. And Fletcher makes no bones about making the case that what that did was replace the original Constitution that needed to be replaced because otherwise we would all be racist. And so I think that we are in the process of figuring this out and unwinding all of that so that we take the country back to the constitutional republic of our founding, supposedly, to the extent that the founding mythology is correct. And that was their intention, is to actually bestow upon a nation a set of rules that would preserve individual sovereignty and national sovereignty. I don't know if that's true, but that's what we were told it was. And the document may well be able to do that for a time. It's up to us to figure out how it needs to be changed through the amendment process. People think it's impossible to pass constitutional amendments. That's because we have fake elections. We don't understand who we are as a nation by virtue of fake elections, fake polls, and the influence of popular culture. And that's unfortunate. And it's one of those problems that hasn't been fully realized yet or recognized. It is kind of a latent discovery, if you will. I think it's something that people will come to understand rather quickly. And then in a moment that will change. And so I think it's entirely possible to pass constitutional amendments and take care of whatever is necessary beyond what the Constitution was, whether or not it needs changing, whether or not it needs scrapping and being replaced with something else. You know, I'm open to all the possibilities. I think that we should be open-minded about these things. We can see that whatever it was, we were protecting its reputation, protecting its sanctity. That thing's not there, okay? Or that thing's been distorted and violated in a certain way. We need to actually do all these things to get back to the thing that we think we are protecting, but aren't. And so with that in mind, I talked about the idea of two presidencies, the way that we see the global regime describe Venezuela and Victor Maduro. They propped up a fake president in Venezuela, one of the most oil-rich nations in the world. So a pretty important country. It's not like some tiny Southeast Asian country or some small Eastern European republic no one's ever heard of, or some tiny country in Africa, or some weird independent island. It's Venezuela. It's a big country. So they propped up a fake president in Venezuela, and we got our election system from them. And we have a fake president here in the United States. That person has whatever control remains within that fake government. And that's it. It's not a real president. It's not a real American president of the constitutional republic. To the extent history records this period as being a presidency at all, and I don't think it will, it'll be one of a usurpation in something that is already itself falsified. And if people want to call it the corporation of the United States, I don't know if that's technically correct or not, but I think that that's what people have in mind and what they understand in maybe inartful terms that don't get the point across. We can see this exist in other countries right now. It's not like we just have to make the historical case and then say, oh, this thing happened back then and now it's this, which, by the way, is true and convincing. That's fine. It's just not true and convincing to someone who's already understood that, or accepted that, I should say, as a conspiracy theory. But to point to the fact that right now in the world, the most powerful people involved in global government, the biggest philanthropists, the people that control the money, the people that implement the banker agenda, as the banker agenda has been known for centuries, those people do this in other countries right now. We should be able to look at it. And if we look at it and we can tell what's going on over there, and we think there's no way that can happen over here, we're fooling ourselves. We should understand that it has happened here, because look at what we are seeing. Joe Biden has not for a single day been a legitimate president of the United States of America. And now most people don't think he's a legitimate president. Most people don't think he's working as president. They don't know who's working as president. But we're going to get into some of that because I don't think it's Joe Biden. And we can see that Donald Trump has significant power and influence in the world, not only after he is reelected, quote unquote, in a fake election, but now and throughout this entire period. I've been making that case, not that cleanly, but just the case that there are two things happening and that you just can't dismiss Donald Trump as a force, someone who is in control of aspects of our country. And then we have Joe Biden's obvious fakeness. Those are foundational beliefs of this podcast. And I don't know any other show like that except for the Devolution shows. And, you know, I guess there are some Q people out there who interpret things this way, but I've mostly heard them call Joe Biden president and pretend that we're in a very close race in a very real election. I was never joking when I said those things. And now that we get closer to more defining moments and more clarifying moments, I think that what I've been saying and what a lot of you people out there have been saying to people you know who stare at you like you're insane, I get it. Trust me, I get it. I have truthers who think I'm insane. So, yeah, I think that it's becoming proven beyond a shadow of a doubt. And I believe that the argument can and will be made and won by us. And that'll be how history is recorded. And it really is up to people to make that argument and not just rely on the idea that someday the authorities are going to tell us, oh, yeah, it was a fake presidency the whole time. And actually, Trump has been blah, blah, blah. I don't see that necessarily happening. This is going to be a thing that the people convince the rest of the people of. And once we hit a critical mass on belief in that, the story from the mainstream media and from academia and official sources is going to be irrelevant. That's not how reality is created. Reality is not created from these authorities. Okay. So reality cannot be described and defined by these authorities. Reality is what it is perceived to be by everyone collectively and agreed upon. I mean, to a large extent, you know, that's how, like, unless people are conscious of their own role in the creation of their own reality, the consensus is usually what people understand to be true about reality. So at some point, the understanding will flip. The reality won't actually change at all in reality prime. And people will guide their lives in different ways. And so these moments are coming. Many of those sorts of moments are coming. But here's what I was going to play yesterday. Where are we here? There we are.
Negotiate that way.
I thought it was odd that today President Biden said that he spoke with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for the first time in 7 weeks or something.
Pathetic.
They've been at war for over a year. So and he hasn't spoken with him in 7 weeks. When was the last time you've spoken with Netanyahu?
Like 2 days ago. And he came to my house in Florida, Mar-a-Lago, with his wife, was lovely. But he came to Mar-a-Lago. He came to, I guess he was
I saw the visit.
At the White House, maybe the UN.
Is there anything you could share with us in terms of that, the Israel-Iran conflict? What would you do to end the war on Israel?
I could tell you that Bibi has been very strong. He is not listening to Biden.
It sounds like he stopped sharing information with the U.S.
Look, Biden is the one that came up with the Afghanistan plan.
So that's Donald Trump, not president, talking about the prime minister of Israel, who the regime is trying to replace in a color revolution. And I know that some people disagree with that take on it. That's all good. And the fake president, Joe Biden, who's actually in control of the situation. Certainly not Joe Biden. He hasn't talked to Netanyahu in 7 weeks. while the U.S. is still continuing to send aid, weapons, I believe, to Israel and money. I think I just saw another $425 million today. All of these transactions, I mean, all this stuff should not be, none of these things should be taken at face value. That's how I should say it. We're going to find out a lot more about the money that was sent to Ukraine and the money that's being sent to Israel and the money that's being sent to Taiwan or wherever. We're going to find a lot more out about that in the future. I can't imagine that we're just sending this money away. It's regime fiat currency in the first place, to the extent it's even happening. Let that go for now. Donald Trump is the one having these conversations. Joe Biden's not having these conversations. Donald Trump talked to Netanyahu 2 days ago. Netanyahu came down to visit Donald Trump. Donald Trump gave him the handshake and then put his left hand on top of their handshake, like I have the upper hands kind of thing. I mean, that was how a lot of people interpreted that. And people are like, well, that's dumb. These aren't comms. It's just a picture. Is it? Why'd they publish that one? Why did he do it? Do you see him do it with other people? I've never seen him do it. People talk about his body language all the time, but that's a weird one. That's a weird comm. I don't know. I don't know why he did it. It's let me see if I can actually find this really quick, just so I can put it up on screen for those people who don't recall. Trump Bibi handshake. Oh man, they got all the how about that? All the results that were just returned to me by Quant when I wrote Trump Bibi handshake upper hand in my search engine are about Trump's handshake with Kamala Harris at the debate. Isn't that incredible? They made such a big deal out of that handshake at the beginning of that debate. Why? Because the Harris people planned on making that a viral moment that would help them. They do real things to create viral moments. And the funny thing is that because they're doing it specifically to create viral moments, that makes it fake. It's amazing. I'm now looking for articles showing the Trump Bibi handshake in that way, and they're not there. It's incredible. They have essentially all of the other photos from that event, but didn't publish the one with Trump having the upper hand. Maybe I can find it on Telegram, and I'm sorry about holding for processing here. Don't like doing that, but you know, sometimes things just come up. Ah, here it is. Save as. Here we are. Finally, the processing has concluded. So here is the picture from late July when Netanyahu visited Mar-a-Lago. Why isn't that in the New York Post? Why isn't that in the Associated Press? I don't understand it. Let's see what the New York Times gives it. Ah, the New York Times shows it. That is actually amazing. Sometimes I wonder if some of these outlets that everyone assumes to be absolutely overtly hostile at all times are actually under control and intentionally made hostile to make it look even more weighted in one direction. The Times, how about that? Trump with the second hand on top of Bibi's hand. Trump with the big smile. Bibi looking, let's say, nonplussed. How's that for a word? Some people get mad about that word. Oh, you're not using it right. Not at me. I just mean in general. So that's one instance. Trump is talking to world leaders, the important ones. Biden is not talking to the important leaders and never really has. I don't believe he's ever talked to Putin. Imagine conducting a proxy war against a nation and not talking to that nation. It has to make you reconsider what war is, doesn't it? If you want peace, then you should be negotiating with the other side. It's not a battle to the death like we pretend it is. I mean, it is for the people directly involved, but not on a global regime level. They would love to be able to destroy Putin's army, I'm sure, but that was never an option. They are trying to keep the thing going to follow a narrative storyline, very likely leading up to this election, for one, because there are levels to which these wars in general are completely and totally fake. But there should be negotiations if they want the war to stop, if they don't actually want people to die, if they want to preserve their territory, there should be negotiations. But there weren't negotiations because they didn't want to meet the negotiation terms. So if you are a president of the United States of America and have your hand in every bit of foreign policy business around the world, if you are the key enforcement arm of the global regime, if your country has the global reserve currency, and your media and entertainment and pop culture gets spread intentionally to the rest of the world, you would think you would be involved with powerful foreign adversary leaders like Vladimir Putin, but Biden wasn't at all. Because, of course, Biden's not a real president. Biden is a, quote unquote president on that layer of fakery. Maybe he has some control over various government agencies to the extent they still have power. And the other regime-oriented countries do business with him, but he's not a real president. It's so crazy that we have to pretend otherwise, or that people intentionally pretend otherwise to convince others that it's true and then call them conspiracy theorists when they say, no, that's not true. I wonder why those people do that. I guess it's just so that they can preserve their reputation within the party of false decorum. Or is it because they are liars and frauds and grifters and they are taking enormous amounts of money to lie to hundreds of thousands or millions of people at a time? The world may never know. I'm kidding about that. I think we will know very soon. And I actually might as well divert to that for just a second and check in on this. I actually asked a poll question on Truth Social today about exactly that. And, oh gosh, apparently there are going to be a lot of funny Kamala Harris interview clips coming out while we're doing this. But maybe we'll get to some of those on the road, or on the way, on the road toward the end of the show. Let me share this from my Truth Social. I asked a very simple question. If Kamala is the winner of the fake election, which of these people will definitely stand up immediately and tell the truth about our elections? Elon Musk, Joe Rogan, Tucker Carlson, Ben Shapiro, Megyn Kelly, Dan Bongino. And everybody could cast as many votes as they like. If they think all 6 of these people will stand up immediately and say, hey, these people are good American patriots who are just part of some info op where they lie to everybody all the time and cause them to make bad decisions, but now they're on the good side and they will call it out immediately. Well, then click all 6 and hit submit, and wonderful, you've casted your vote. Elon Musk at 39%, Joe Rogan at 7%, Tucker Carlson at 21%, Ben Shapiro at 4%, Megyn Kelly at 7%, Dan Bongino at 22%. So people think that Elon Musk will probably, maybe, speak up and say something immediately about our elections. I actually do think Elon Musk will do that. But I guess there's an argument to be made that he's going to stay out of it for a while. So if that's the basis on which these people say he's not going to, I would totally accept that immediately. Otherwise, I think he is going to. I think that what we know about his standpoint on related issues suggests that he would call that out at a particular time. I don't know. He's a defense contractor. I guess we'll see. Tucker Carlson at 21 and Dan Bongino at 22. Those seem largely representative of which characters of the mainstream people in MAGA have some relatively high degree of trust for compared to the rest of the media. Megyn Kelly and Joe Rogan are 7%, so nobody really thinks they're going to step up. I think that's probably right. Ben Shapiro at 4%, nobody thinks he is either. One would think that if all this was an info op, if all this was just an op to wake up the normies, and that's what excuses these people lying about very fundamental issues for the last 4 years, one would think that there would be a stopping point, right? Like after the fake election has taken place, that would be the point to immediately say, hey, this election is stolen, but there's actually been all this other stuff going on. So we don't need to freak out. We don't need to start a civil war immediately. How about we just chill out for a minute? Let's prove our case. Everybody knows it. We don't have to go crazy. And let's see this thing through to the end. They don't have any real way to do that. I hope that they do it, because at some point there's got to be a coming to truth. They can't pretend to just have recognized it and then just go on lying about other new things. I mean, we're not going to say they're just doing this to wake up the normies forever, are we? Because if we're doing that, then we're the normies. That's the whole thing about repeating something over and over and over again, while life shows you in every possible way that it's wrong. Maybe it's right. At some point, they got to come out and tell the truth and be like, hey, yeah, you know, we had to keep this thing quiet. It will never cease to amaze me that people are still just on it. A Snowcat operator says, I have a friend that can't seem to break away from Ben Shapiro. Yeah, man, I get it. They think that Ben Shapiro is really smart and really dangerous because the leftists they still listen to tell them that. And some of those leftists are Joe Rogan, Megyn Kelly, and guys like Dave Rubin. They're all like, we're conservative-ish now. How? Dave Rubin's a gay dad who denies election fraud. Joe Rogan says he's a liberal and denies election fraud. Megyn Kelly is as liberal as you can get for a quote unquote conservative and denies election fraud. I had a series of posts this morning about how neoconservatism is just an outgrowth of Trotsky based on this Bill Kristol clip. And maybe it's worth playing. I want to come back to the prior subject, but maybe this is worth playing just because there are a lot of legacy conservatives who are now MAGA, who haven't really been able to fully let go of their days as neoconservatives, despite, I hope, understanding that neoconservatism is just leftism. It's just a different brand. It is a controlled opposition partner of the uniparty left. I think that's the best way of saying it. And listen to Bill Kristol, because he's going to admit it. He's going to talk about how he even says Reagan and Bush are liberals in this. Neoconservatism is liberal. He says it right here. And they are agreeing about that. And they are agreeing about that on the basis that both sides of the uniparty agree fully about the Zionist project and about the global regime project. And so they help push that agenda forward. Here we are. Bill Kristol. Bill Kristol, by the way, again, is it Project for a New American Century? I'll look that up while this plays. One of the most prominent neoconservatives. His dad was Irving Kristol, one of the forefathers of neoconservatism in America, who was a huge, huge proponent of Trotsky.
Trump's world is not a good world for Israel. It's not a good world for the Jews, really. Trump's America is not a good world for the Jews. I mean, if I could just get to that for a second. I mean, Jews benefit a lot from a deep liberal in the broad sense of liberal, which includes, Reaganite conservative over to Hubert Humphrey and Kamala Harris liberals. It's important to Jews to preserve the strength of liberal institutions and liberal norms and liberal practices in that broad sense in America. Trump has no commitment to any of that. And maybe for now he's beating up Haitians and he's demagoguing the most recent immigrants, but that's not a stable basis on which to assume that it doesn't turn against the Jews, and we've seen that he has no problem hanging out with people who genuinely are anti-Semites. I mean, and they're close to him. Tucker Carlson is not like a trivial figure. Tucker Carlson is really a close advisor. Is close to Donald Trump. I mean, he's one of the 3 or 4 people who insisted on the Vance vice presidential pick. Some of these other people from Silicon Valley are not reliable friends of Israel, to say the least. And so the degree to which a Trumpy America is not a safe, unfortunately, as safe in America for Jews and as welcoming in America as a more traditional America, either a traditional Reagan-Bush America or a traditional Clinton-Biden America. Those are both fine. Then we can quibble about some stuff on the margins, But Trump is outside of that framework, and that's an important. When you get outside that framework, history suggests things get pretty dangerous for Jews.
All right, so most of that was ridiculous. It's worth noticing that he just set up J.D. Vance and Tucker Carlson for a tickle fight, pretending that they are the people out front opposing this project. That's preposterous. He just equated Reagan and Bush with liberals, the neocon project with liberals. It's all about whether or not things are safe for the Jews in Bill Kristol's telling. Does Bill Kristol care about the Jews? Is Bill Kristol actually Jewish? Seems to me he probably cares about people who call themselves Jews but aren't. He cares about the global Zionist project. And to the extent that these people are secular or atheist Jews, then we just have to accept that being Jewish is an ethnicity in a real way. Is it a religion or is it an ethnicity? And at some point, maybe we'll resolve that. We're told it's both, but it's really just both interchangeably. The belief system actually isn't required, even though that's what it is, unless they are actually bloodline members of a tribe. And it turns out they're not. So which one is it? Okay, here is Bill Kristol's Wikipedia page. In 1997, he co-founded the Project for the New American Century with Robert Kagan. Anybody know who Robert Kagan is? Well, Robert Kagan is the husband of Victoria Nuland. Hey, how about that? He's on a national security think tank with Liz Cheney. Isn't that great? Very conservative. Very, very conservative. Jonah Goldberg. Oh, they're friends for sure. Just keeps going and going. John Podhoretz. That's this is Commentary Magazine right here. And I mean, this covers all the neoconservatives. They are just global communists who put the word conservative in their name and really, really love doing things with the military. So Americans were easily convinced that there was something actually conservative about neoconservatives. But there's not, unless you're trying to conserve the entire world for Zionism. Okay. Somebody in the chat just said I was on 1.25 speed. Brain Whiskey Girl. I guess, oh, you're catching up. Okay. I was like, I hope I'm not coming out in 1.25 speed because I don't even know how that's possible. I would probably spend the rest of the show just on that. And we don't need that sort of thing. There was maybe one other, a couple other Bill Kristol posts here. Bill Kristol is really something. Anyway, some articles on neocons and their relationship with Trotsky. Oral in my Telegram chat sent this article along today from the Times of Israel, How Jewish is Neoconservatism. And it goes through talking about it, goes through the history. While describing the many conspiracy theories about neocons which he had encountered, David Brooks famously quipped, "Con is short for conservative and neo is short for Jewish." That's David Brooks a member of the New York Times editorial board who used to be their conservative, and then through the Trump era was their token conservative who is okay because he hates Trump and is a neocon. I mean, people get upset with this stuff. They get uncomfortable with it, I should say, because they don't like talking about, quote unquote, the Jews. I don't have a problem with the Jews. Okay. I don't have a problem with anybody until those people become global communists. I have a problem with the ideology of global communism. I don't think that they have any right to rule. I don't think they have any right to the territory they claim a right to. Jews were welcome historically in a great many countries around the world and assimilated into those cultures. When people don't assimilate into the culture of the country and they try to take over that country, people are going to be upset about that. The idea that anyone being opposed to that is a form of bigotry is absolutely insane, but that's what the neocons persist on and have for a long time. The idea that there's something inherently American about neoconservatism is insane. The fact that they dominated the Republican Party doesn't make them conservatives. The fact that they dominated the Republican Party means that everyone should be ultra skeptical about the entire GOP establishment. And just like they are about the Democrat establishment, it's not like the Democrat establishment is good. But people aren't like that, including with the podcasters and the media people who they explain are attempting to wake up the normies. Are they attempting to wake up the normies, or are they just still catering to the neocon centers of power and money because they like being rich and hosting a show? They like their jobs and they don't actually care about getting down to the root of things. Maybe they're all brought on to a military info op that Donald Trump is somehow managing or running. And one day in the future, we'll find that out. Until then, it seems like they're basically taking all of the same viewpoints that they took in their careers working for neoconservatives. Brain Stranigan says, why is it that every time anyone points out anything globalist as bad, someone yells anti-Semite, revealing, I guess. And again, you can be triggered by that comment. The question is that correct? Let's find out. I have a good way of actually proving it today. This is a post that someone sent my way this morning by the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, run by Jonathan Greenblatt. Their main purpose is letting us know who's being anti-Semitic at any given moment so that those people can be canceled and boycotted, debanked. They did that. The Anti-Defamation League on the 7th of March, 2023 said former president on X, formerly Twitter, former President Trump also delivered remarks that were in character, but still dangerous. His claims about expelling warmongers, driving out globalists, casting out communists, and throwing off those who hate our country echo classic hashtag anti-Semitic rhetoric. Now, he got ratioed here, which means that there were more replies than likes, which indicates that the people who saw his post and chose to interact with it were by and large unhappy with his post, let's say. He did not get much support there. But he just listed off warmongers, globalists. Gosh, I already forgot it. That's how my brain is today. Expelling warmongers, driving out globalists, casting out communists, throwing off those who hate our country. So he is essentially taking responsibility on behalf of, quote unquote, the Jews, of being warmongers, globalists, communists, and people who hate our country. Trump didn't say that. The ADL said that. They identified with those comments. That's amazing. it's a conspiracy theory when we say it, and it's not a conspiracy theory when they say it. Actually, no, that's wrong. It's still a conspiracy for us even when they say it. So me taking his remarks literally and thinking about what they obviously mean is a conspiracy theory. Him making the remarks and people agreeing with him is not a conspiracy theory. Kind of makes it seem like the underlying reality doesn't matter at all. Let's get back to Donald Trump talking to Benjamin Netanyahu. He is, as I said, talking to a great many important world leaders, and Joe Biden is not. I suppose we're supposed to believe that for the last 7 weeks, Kamala Harris has been talking to Benjamin Netanyahu. I mean, maybe he's handling business that way, negotiating. Maybe he's doing it for show. Maybe he's doing it because there are powerful interests that want to know those conversations are happening. I don't know. Donald Trump just said he talked to him 2 days prior. That was, I believe, Sunday with Maria Bartiromo. So, yeah, why would anybody believe that someone other than Donald Trump is controlling the most important elements of our society, most particularly the military, when all the other powerful world leaders talk to him? People just can't believe it because Biden says he's sending this, he's sending that. They're sending these weapons. They're sending this money. They're giving them intelligence and targeting and all of these things. Joe Biden must be doing it, right? Because Joe Biden goes out and takes credit for it. Well, if Donald Trump goes out and he does something in a real way that changes how things are working, and they can't deny that that thing happened, well, what choice do they have if the regime is pretending that Biden is the president, and they need to keep that illusion going for not only the people in the United States, but the people in the other countries around the world that recognize Joe Biden as president? The other English Commonwealth nations, for instance, the other nations of the global regime, if they recognize Joe Biden as president, then they need to keep that illusion going for their society as well. And that's why we have that propaganda media doing the same thing our propaganda media does. They tell these stories so that other countries also believe them. If everybody around the world knew that Joe Biden was a fake president, then it would be even more difficult for them to pull this off, because those people would ask their own leaders, hey, why are you working with that fake president? So they keep the illusion going. If Trump did something and they need to keep the illusion going, if he did something that only a president can do and everyone's going to notice it eventually, then they have to pretend they did it, or essentially just accept that they did it, but not really deny it. Like, for instance, a subject we're going to come back to later, Trump's tariffs that have remained in place. We talk about the devolution stuff. They try to hit Trump on tariffs and tell people that it's a new tax, that they're going to be taxed almost $4,000 a year based on Trump's tariffs. And they don't mention the tariffs because they kept the tariffs in place. Why aren't they taking credit for it if it's something they did and it's good? If it's something they did and it's not good, why didn't they get rid of it? What normie can answer these questions? What normie can even contemplate these questions? And I'm not trying to single myself out. I count all of you in this, all of my friends at Badlands, many of the people in the Q community, the truth community, people that have actually wrestled with what it means that we have a fake president in place, that we are showing the rest of the world our fake president, and then a lot of people believe it. They don't want to mess with that stuff because they didn't tell the truth about the elections. And if you didn't tell the truth about the elections, then whenever everybody understands the truth about the elections, you're going to be the person that lied about it. So they don't want any of this stuff to actually ever come out. Why don't people think about that? If Trump does something in the real world that only a president could do, and it's something that would conflict with the Biden-Harris agenda, well, then they have two choices. Pretend they didn't do it. What does that mean? It can only mean that they're not actually president and vice president. It means that they're not in power, right? Or it means that, what? They're lying? Why can't they use it against Trump properly? I think that has to be why. They should be taking credit for it if it's good. And if it's bad, they should have removed it. Okay, so let's continue down that path. I messed this up. We're going to have to hold for processing for just a second again. I occasionally forget that I can't just pull a video from Telegram the same way I can pull it from Twitter. I can just post it on. I gave myself the wrong post. Hold for processing. Terrible at this. I'm really having a hell of a day with the hold for processing. We're getting there, though. We are getting there. It is all going to be okay. One way or another, it's all going to be okay. Even after 11/5, even if the television says that Kamala won, it's still going to be okay. We're going to make it be okay, everybody. That's what we're going to do. Check this out. This is from, well, you'll see. This is Donald Trump doing an interview with the flamboyant dandy, Glenn Beck. Is Glenn Beck a neocon? Somebody please answer.
Actually the president, Mr. President?
Well, I think it's a committee of people, and they might not even know who the committee is. They may not even know themselves. Does that make sense? It's a group of people that are in different levels of D.C., and they surround a man that was not the most capable person. By the way, never was.
Right.
But certainly not anymore.
Yeah.
And she's worse than he is. She's worse than he is. And the difference is she was a believer. You know, she was a believer for a long time. She was a Marxist
right.
for a long time. She's further left than Bernie. You've heard that many times.
Yeah.
You talk about it. But she's further left than Pocahontas, okay? Pocahontas is probably further left than Bernie, I think. I don't know how you rate him. I'd have to go by your scale. I believe in your scale maybe more than mine. You know better. But if you think about it, you know, we have some people, and she is considered the most left in the entire Senate, and not the smartest.
So we have a committee of people who are serving as president. Now, what do you make of that? I don't know what to make of that. We can make a lot of things of that. We could be talking about the global regime in general. He could be using it as as some kind of, look at that. I look like a punk rocker or something. Whatever. He can be using it as some kind of euphemism, right? He could just be trying to troll them a little bit. Oh, it's a bunch of people doing it. Joe Biden doesn't have control of his faculties. He's unable to execute the job. Therefore, other people are running it. Is that committee of people just the bureaucratic administrative state, the deep state? Entirely possible. That's what he's talking about. He could be talking about that from a higher level. These people direct Joe Biden, and Joe Biden is a pass through for those directions to that administrative state. What does Joe Biden actually have to do? I mean, he's certainly not negotiating with other countries. What does Kamala Harris have to do? These people are like celebrity spokespeople for the government. Maybe I can fix. Every time I do that, my hair looks worse. It's crazy. What's happening here? All right, now we're better. They are the celebrity spokespeople for the global regime in the United States, the Uniparty, the evil twin faction. They are just the spokespeople. They try to sell us that they have everything under control and that what they're doing is on our behalf and in our best interest. And they're actually they're actually serving the American people in some way. It really is incredible. So Jay Gonzalez says Beck is the king of neocons. Brain Strain again says Beck has been blackpilling for years. Listened to him years ago on the radio. Dynamite, yes, Glenn Beck is a neocon. I can't get over his tear-dripping appeal to Israel for dual citizenship after October 7th. It's a great call. He definitely did do that. He was laughing in a very, very fake way to Donald Trump. He was groveling before Donald Trump's power. That was gross. I'm sure that Trump sensed that and respects him less for doing that. I mean, unless Glenn Beck is an op too, right? So who's controlling the government? It's controlled by committee. My good friend John Harold today, you know him as Patel Patriot, posted these screenshots. The Executive Order 13961 of December 7th, 2020. This is the executive order from Trump that John refers to as the Devolution EO. Section 1, it is the policy of the United States to maintain comprehensive and effective continuity programs that ensure national security and the preservation of government structure. That's essentially what Mike Pompeo was alluding to in his comments that we went through a couple times over the past week. From Section 2, continuity of operations, continuity of government, and enduring constitutional government. That's what they have to ensure. Section 3, Executive Committee, the Federal Mission Resilience Executive Committee. Executive Committee is hereby established. So, a committee of people, an executive committee. John also added this from the same. The Executive Committee shall coordinate the development of an implementation plan for the strategy and other continuity policy as described in Section 4B of this order, and shall facilitate execution of the plan and other continuity policy as appropriate. That's what the Executive Committee shall do. So was Trump using a euphemism? Let's hear the clip. Once again, we might as well just listen to it again, right? And I'll cut it off before we get to the Elizabeth Warren, Pocahontas, Bernie Sanders, who's the most leftist stuff.
Actually, the president, Mr. President.
Well, I think it's a committee of people, and they might not even know who the committee is. They may not even know themselves. Does that make sense? It's a group of people that are in different levels of D.C., and they surround a man that was not the most capable person. By the way, never was.
Right.
But certainly not anymore.
Yeah.
And she's worse than he is. She's worse than he is.
All right. By the way, is that Glenn Beck? Like it's filmed over his right shoulder behind him. And then he's got that screen in front of him looking at a picture of Glenn Beck. Or was that like from the production, the producer side of things? I don't know what that's about. Also, by the way, the Blaze, that little DeSantis simp, Steve Deace, that guy told his audience, after having said that the elections were stolen, he told his audience that he couldn't talk about it anymore because he didn't want to get in trouble and potentially cost all of his employees at the company their jobs. And so then he just ignored it, went back to being a Trump hater, and supported Ron DeSantis in the most hateful imaginable ways. These people are just neocons. It's the same project. They're the partners of the controlled opposition on the left. They're not better because they sometimes say things that we like. Leftists agree with us sometimes. It's not like it makes us the same. They're like, we're your allies. No, you are people who are trying to co-opt MAGA by sending us little treats and telling us how big your platform is and how important it is that we respect the size of your platform and understand that what you're really trying to do is wake up the normies by lying to millions and millions of people at once. So again, Government president by executive committee. And this is under the understanding, the theory, John's theory, that Trump devolved the powers of the presidency and that the country is being run in some kind of power saving mode, if that makes sense. If you're an iPhone user, I don't know. I assume Androids have this sort of thing too, where they just reduce the power and they say, we're not going to emphasize all of the functions of this phone. We're just going to emphasize the necessary ones until we can put this thing on a charger so that you can still perform your most important functions so you don't lose anything. We're just going to slow things down a bit. We're just going to protect the stuff back here. And I've described it before as a backstop. I've described it before. The access that the fake Biden administration would have is within a certain playpen. They're not able to go outside that. So, I mean, every day there are more clues that this is what is actually happening. And people just continue to believe that it's a conspiracy theory, which is really funny, man, because there are certain ways the story could go after 11/5 where devolution would no longer be the focus necessarily, and they could just ease their way out of it without anybody really knowing if they are willing to just let the mainstream narrative continue to play through. And hey, man, at that point, people are going to have a real moral conundrum about what all of this has been for. The purpose, as far as I'm concerned, is not to take things from one set of liars and hand them to a different set of liars. All right. Changing from the controlled opposition uniparty left to the controlled opposition uniparty right is not the purpose of this project. That's not why anybody went through everything that people went through. That's not why they've been patient. Man, I don't know. I hope that's not it. That would say very bad things about Donald Trump. I don't believe those things to be true, but there are ways this could go. I think at some point there has to be some public understanding and admission of what this 4-year process has been. And I don't think it's on Donald Trump, because Donald Trump has said those things out in public. We can take Donald Trump's word for that and back it up with the research, and that's fine. But for everybody else who's spread that thing, who's not Donald Trump and who hasn't woken up 100 million people in America, they don't get the benefit of the doubt on that stuff. That's how I see it. People are going to have to make those decisions for themselves, because at some point it's going to be a moral question. Brain Stranigan asks if I have a take on Pompeo and if I trust Kansas. As the Q post says, trust Kansas. Everybody has determined that means Mike Pompeo, because Pompeo is from Kansas. And Q people in the audience, if I'm getting something about that wrong and there are other Kansas Pompeo connections in the Q posts, by all means, send them my way. If it says trust Grassley, trust Ray, I don't know who else it says trust, but it uses their names and then says trust Kansas. And we're just like, okay, that's definitely Pompeo. Why didn't they use Pompeo's name? Now, it might be. I'm not saying it's not. I'm just saying I don't think you can put 100% of your eggs in that basket. And I think that that's one of the problems with people who rely on Q posts for everything. Like, you're not supposed to have faith in Q posts. You're supposed to understand the information among other information. And man, Stormy Joe, amazing at understanding those posts, amazing at them. And I don't know where he stands on what I'm saying, but having faith in Q posts and then cutting yourself off from the possibility that the interpretation of a cryptic post from an anonymous source on a message board, that's not the sort of thing you should put faith in my mind. So I don't know what I think about Mike Pompeo. I think there's a very strong chance that he's probably a good guy, part of this operation, doing things in the background. We heard Robert F. Kennedy Jr. on the interview he did last August or September with Tucker Carlson say that he had dinner with Mike Pompeo in Las Vegas and that Pompeo had Secret Service with him. We've heard that Robert O'Brien has had Secret Service with him. So, I mean, at some point, you got to think maybe there's a reason for these things. Now, I suppose we could be 100% wrong about these reasons. I don't think we are, but we could be. No one else has an explanation for any of it. So they just ignore these things. They say, no, Joe Biden's president. I don't know why. I don't know why Mike Pompeo has Secret Service, but can't be the reason you're saying. That's what normies do. They have no idea what you're talking about. They just understand that the implications of things being the way you say are conspiracy theories. And so they can't go down there with you. They want to preserve their reputation as very, very smart people who just happen not to know any of these things. I love it, man. They're like, this is the most important thing that's ever happened. This is the most important election ever. Yeah, okay. So why aren't you trying to learn more about it? I never do understand that. They're like, oh, Joe Rogan and Ben Shapiro, that's enough. Is it? Is it? They tell you what the newspapers say. They tell you what everybody else tells you, and therefore those things must all be really happening based on the fact that everyone's talking about them. Isn't it amazing how easy it is to just fool everyone all the time? And it's evil. For a time, I suppose it seemed genius. Doesn't seem that genius to me anymore, honestly. The trick still works. It's just being seen through now. It's like when they had that reality television show where the magician would come on television, the masked magician would come and reveal all the other magician's secrets. The secret's out there for anyone who wants to simply observe it and understand it. Something is said, a story is disseminated in the morning or in the middle of the night from intelligence agencies. Then media figures disseminate that story. The newspapers write about that story. And then all of the media analysts and influencers and everybody else just does work derivative of those stories. And I understand that's a problem for me and some of the way that I go about these things, which is why I emphasize almost every day that we cannot rely on the truth of these stories. The only thing we can rely on is what they are wanting us to believe through the publishing of these stories. And these are things that we can gather a lot of hints about and understand in relation to a global project that they tell us about, that they advertise. And when we do that, we can actually have some idea of what's going on, or at least some idea of how to react on the things they'll be telling us are true in the relatively near future, which puts us way ahead of anyone who is simply talking about what they saw on television. So many of these shows are just these guys taking clips from television and telling you how that clip is bad and wrong based on their uniparty political perspectives. Or they just emote about it. Like Tim Pool gets all very angry. I guess that's how they show their authenticity of feeling about these issues. I don't know. Glenn Beck. Let's continue. Let's switch subjects slightly. Trump just told us that the country was being run by committee, but we will not believe that. We will not believe it. It is just a euphemism. It can't be true. If it was true, the news would have told us. Right? I used to say that 10 years ago. I was saying that. I think I said that when they first announced Pizzagate, when I was still a liberal. I couldn't believe that something like that could be true and that the news wouldn't tell us. Like, hey, this thing's out there. If this was true, they would have to be reporting on it. I didn't understand those dynamics back then, but I understand them now. And once you understand them, you have to apply them in all cases. They would never, ever, ever tell us that their government was fake. That's not something that they would do. The regime puts that government in there to create an illusion of legitimacy for the rest of the world. We even heard it in that Axios article. The premise of legitimacy. They have to maintain the premise of legitimacy. And once they can no longer maintain it, they can't have the fake government anymore. They maintain it through the media. So there's no way the media is going to report on things that are going to tear down the illusion of legitimacy. It's a double standard, you see. They report everything that tears down the illusion of Trump's legitimacy, which is not illusionary, but there is still a public perception of legitimacy. They want to tear away at that. It's a double standard because there are two governments. This is funny.
We're talking decades that the election, Ainsley, has not moved outside of 1 or 2 points either way. I mean, at some point in the past 3-4 election cycles, you've had one candidate go up 5, go up 9, even 10. This hasn't happened. It's been right there in the middle, and the swing states are even tighter. So if these polls are anywhere near accurate, this is the tightest race we've ever seen. So any little thing, another shoe that drops that affects some small population of voters could have an effect in any one of these swing states.
So that is Fox News' Brett Baier letting us know that this is the tightest race we've ever seen. As close can be. Does anyone believe that? Could anyone possibly believe that? It is preposterous to think that this race is very, very close. It is not close. And they are maintaining the illusion of a close race because that allows them to execute the rest of their program. And they could never tell the country that Donald Trump actually had 65 or 70 or 80% approval, and that many people are going to go out and actually vote for him. They could never say that. Because again, that destroys the illusion of legitimacy for their fake government immediately. The entire premise of these uniparty governments having any chance at legitimacy and being able to win real elections is the entire chance that they would be able to maintain this illusion. I just totally lost my train of thought. Sorry, I was reading something. Sometimes I do that and I'm like, oh, I have this other thought over there. I want to go there. Apologies. The close race. They maintain this through fake polls and fake elections, and they have to do that. Otherwise, people will not believe that the uniparty could ever be elected. And that's the regime's government in place, the fake government in place. The media's job is to support that. So they have to maintain the idea that it's a close race, or else everything would have to change. And I really, really sincerely hope that prior to this election, or I guess shortly after, we'll get some resolution on the 2020 race, because people need to know that the Democrat viewpoint is not a 50% viewpoint. 50% of the country does not agree with any of that bullshit. And it doesn't matter if they've been convinced to like Donald Trump. They don't agree with that stuff. And upon knowing that it's actually not that many people, people will begin to behave in much different ways. And I look forward to that. Let me see where we are here. So Brett is apparently interviewing Kamala Harris right now, or it started at the top of the hour. I'm going to see if I can get some clips from that while we're on the subject. Where can I go for these? That whole thing is much harder without Twitter, I have to say, because that is where everyone drops the content. But I can't get it there. So, oh, maybe it's not out yet. It must not be out yet. Posobiec tweeted something about how Kamala was already losing control of her emotions and getting very, very upset. I don't know if he's watching it or if these are just reports, because it was taped beforehand. And Trump tweeted this out, knowing that on the day that, I'm sorry, Elon tweeted this out. I'm all out of sorts right now. Let me see if I can find this. On the day that Kamala Harris is being interviewed by Fox News, going into this dangerous and unfriendly territory, Elon just happens to post this. There it is. Okay, I had it the whole time. Gosh, man. Suddenly, I think I'm not organized at all. All right. So Elon posts this. This is a tweet from Mark Benioff saying Harris declined repeated requests for an interview for this story. This is from Time Magazine. Biden did the interview, a long interview. Trump did that long interview. I actually covered that interview, I believe, in its entirety on this podcast. So go back for that if you like. Elon responds, Kamala is avoiding any interviews that won't post-edit her answers to sound like they make sense. So this is the CBS controversy coming back. Donald Trump has been mentioning that at numerous occasions about how CBS should lose its broadcasting license based on the fact that they are running election interference by editing Kamala Harris interviews in a way that makes her look good. Whereas Leslie Stahl, you might remember, they edited to make Trump look bad, and Leslie Stahl was hostile the entire interview. So Elon Musk says that on the day Kamala is going on Fox News to be interviewed by Bret Baier, the man that called the election in Arizona, I believe, for Kamala Harris. I think that's how it went, right? Yeah. Anyhow, man, there's so much. It's been 4 years of just nonstop this stuff. Kamala is avoiding any interviews that won't post editor answers to sound like they make sense. So the logical conclusion from Elon's post was that he was pointing out that Fox News must have agreed to edit Kamala's answers in order for her to do the interview, because she's not doing interviews elsewhere unless they will edit her answers. Now, is Elon just shooting his mouth off? Hey, maybe, right? I don't know that that's what he's thinking. I can't prove it to you. It's a baseless claim. All I did was use logic and obvious timing, since Kamala going on Fox News is one of the main subjects of the day. Of course, Elon Musk on Twitter, the, what does he call himself? Twit King or something like that? Twit boss? Whatever it is, Elon is aware that Kamala Harris is going on Fox News for an interview today. So to jump from one thing to the next, that's a thought that almost had to connect in his mind, I believe. We had one of the funniest Trump interviews yesterday. And the viral moment is one I think that probably all of you have already seen at this point or heard. But if not, then we're going to do it again for you, or do it for the first. If not, we're going to do it for the first time for you. It'll be again for everybody else. I know how these things work sometimes. This is the viral clip. The context here is that they're having a long discussion about tariffs. It's all about Trump's economic policies. The event is at the Economic Club of Chicago, and it's hosted by the editor-in-chief of Bloomberg. I think his name is John Micklethwaite, a British man, he's quite a fanciful dandy himself. Very, very refined, very respectable. I'm sure he knows absolutely everything about economics. And of course he doesn't. And Trump absolutely lights him up on tariffs and a number of other subjects. Let's check out this one.
You said, President Trump, at the moment, there is a thing called the Trump trade in the markets. Do you know what that is? The Trump trade is very simple. People are betting that your policies are going to drive up debt, they're going to drive up inflation, so they're going to drive up interest rates. Are the investors wrong?
Yeah, I had 4 years no inflation. I had 4 years no inflation.
But that was when you had much.
I had 4 years. It's better than that. And Biden, who has no idea where the hell he is, okay? Biden went 2 years with no inflation because he inherited from me. And then they started spending money like drunken sailors. They spent so much money. It was so ridiculous, the money they were spending. They were spending on the Green New Scam. The Green New Scam, the Green New Deal, you know, it was conceived of by AOC +3. She never even studied the environment in college. She went to a nice college. She came out, she just said, the Green New Scam. She just named all these things.
President Trump, the issue at the moment, the markets are looking at the fact you are making all these promises. Latest one was car loans. You're flooding the thing with giving giveaways.
But we're going to grow.
I was actually quite kind to you. I used 7 trillion. The upper estimate is 15 trillion. People like the Wall Street Journal, who's hardly a communist organization,
yeah, but you don't know.
They have criticized you on this as well. You are running up enormous debts.
What does the Wall Street Journal know? I'm meeting with them tomorrow. What does the Wall Street Journal know? They've been wrong about everything. So have you, by the way. You've been wrong about
You're trying to turn this. You're trying to turn this.
You've been wrong about
You're trying to turn this into debate. There are business people.
You're wrong. You've been wrong. You've been wrong all your life on this stuff. You've been wrong. Now, let me tell you about currency. You're gonna, you're going jumping a lot of.
So Donald Trump, Wharton Business School. He knows about finance. He ran a billion-dollar company that he started himself. And he was president. He knows what he's talking about. This globalist has no idea. It's incredible that this man, and maybe it's all set up, right? Otherwise, it's incredible that this man has the audacity to sit there and continue to try to cut off Donald Trump over and over and over again, as if the crowd came to see the Bloomberg News British man wreck the president. That's what they think this is. And of course, that's what normal media interviews from the mainstream, from the regime media are. They try to get Donald Trump. They want him to say something stupid so they can make a viral video out of it. They're going to ask him a question and sound like they're very smart, know everything they're talking about, and then make Donald Trump sound crazy when he responds in an honest way. It's the same thing they did in the White House press briefing room throughout COVID. Donald Trump has had to deal with those kinds of interviews for his entire presidency, both terms of it. And this interviewer keeps trying to bring Donald Trump back to answering his specific question in the specific way he wants it answered. And this is something that liberals do in general because they have the behavior modeled for them on television. They will ask a question in a specific way and be like, answer this thing, answer this thing. And it's like, I can answer it, but first I have to tell you that the premises of your question are wrong. And I can't answer the question in any important way when you have these wrong premises. So I need to explain to you why these premises are wrong. And then we can return to your question if you still want to ask it after we have corrected these other problems. Now, Donald Trump doesn't have time to go through all of these things. So instead, he just steamrolls this guy once he understands that he's going to be adversarial. And that's what he always does. He just asserts his position and says the things he wants to say so that whatever audience is out there can hear the things he has to say and reckon with those things rather than focus on being polite to the interlocutor and ascribing to the incentive and punishment structure within the party of false decorum. Are there going to be people out there with very special sensitivities who find Donald Trump boorish and mean and unable to stick to the subject? Yeah, there's going to be those people. There have always been those people. In many ways, I was one of those people in 2015 and 2016. So I get it. I understand the mindset. But until people get out of that, they're not going to be able to learn anything and they're going to continue to be clueless about what's actually happening. It makes no sense to try to corral Donald Trump into a corner with what the Wall Street Journal says or what economists believe is going to cost $7 trillion. It's like, okay, well, why does he have to just assume that the Wall Street Journal is right or some economist is right? I don't assume that economists and journalists are right. The Wall Street Journal just gets to dictate what potential policies will bring in a potential future. It is insane that we have ever allowed our politics to be dominated by that sort of talk. Well, you know, the Wall Street Journal says that if those tariffs are implied, it could eventually cost up to 300,000 jobs in America. What? What does it mean? Also, sometimes, and I'm not saying this specific policy, but sometimes there are policies that absolutely must be implemented because the Constitution doesn't allow the way they have it right now. And there's going to be some downside to the implementation of that policy over the short term. It's still the right policy and it still has to be done. So all of those arguments, I mean, if and when any of those arguments are legitimate, you should accept their legitimacy and explain why it's not a problem if you support a viewpoint. But this sort of argumentation is not legitimate in the first place. So, I mean, if Trump was out there saying, economists say this is going to create zillions and zillions of jobs and like giving exact numbers on all this stuff, it would be nonsense. It would still be nonsense, but that's not what he does. He talks about why things are principled and why they've become a problem. Okay. What does the Wall Street Journal know? You've been wrong all your life. And he can know that because the point of view requires you to be actually wrong in the real world, only correct in the false reality, because they are propping up a falsehood, a broad falsehood that the way the world works, according to them, is all legitimate business that is in line with laws and instituted by legitimate governments. But none of that is true. It's a criminal enterprise, a worldwide criminal enterprise allowed by governments that are fully illegitimate and totally corrupted, totally under control of the global regime. And for a long time, they had the might of the U.S. military to enforce their program everywhere around the world. A perfect example would be guarding opium fields in Afghanistan for 20 years. So, yeah, man, you can know immediately that they've been wrong about these things for their whole lives because they are putting forward a point of view that is wholly wrong in the real world. There's no part of that guy's economic understanding that is valid in the real world. It is a false reality, economics. Also very pro-globalist and pro-global trade. Let's go to more clips from that interview yesterday. Here we are. Setting up for live streams is so much different for me than setting up for my normal show. So pardon my delays.
So they're taking a tremendous advantage of us, $350 billion on trade, and we're then supporting them. In other words, it's not sustainable. You can't keep doing this. You can't have that, China, all of these countries. And stupid people made these deals. I saw trade deals that were so stupid that you'd have to be, that was so bad that you'd have to be an idiot to sign them. And we signed them for years. We had, I could tell you trade deals that I have never seen anything. I said, who would agree to this? They had to be corrupt.
They had to be corrupt. To make those deals, they had to be corrupt because there's no way a rational human being, I always say either corrupt or extremely stupid, because there's no way a rational human being would ever sign the trade deals that this country signed. And I got out of many of those deals. So
as I said, Trump steamrolling, his interlocutor there, the very refined British man, supports all of the things that Trump is calling stupid and evil and corrupt. He is essentially calling that man across him, from him, stupid and evil and corrupt. And he said he did say it to his face already. He said, you've been wrong about everything your whole life. So he's telling him. And he's right. He's talking about trade deals implemented by the global regime, by globalists. And he's right. Here's another clip from yesterday. And actually, before that, let's talk about this. I want to get the story on. It's going to take me 1 second. Hold for processing again. I've messed up my links. Forgive me, forgive me. How unprofessional. The story that Trump told about the factories being built in Mexico is worth commenting on because I think it supports the rest of what we have been discussing over these past few days, which is Trump's role as whatever he is right now. The difference between the false government layered on top and the real government, the constitutional republic underneath. Okay, I think I found this. Here we are.
He said, oh, how are you doing? How have you been? I said, could I ask you, how are those plants that you mentioned, those giant plants that you're building in Mexico, how is that coming along? Have you finished them? No, sir. They abandoned the project when they heard you're running. They abandoned the project when they saw that you were winning and doing well. I said, wow, isn't that beautiful?
All the same.
Because I told them, and I said it publicly, they're not going to sell one car into the United States. I said, if I run this country, if I'm going to be president of this country, I'm going to put a 100, 200, 2,000% tariff. They're not going to sell one car into the United States because we're not going to destroy our country by, because I know you're an anti-tariff guy, but I'm the exact opposite. If I had, there was no other way I could have stopped them other than, what am I going to do? Negotiate with Mexico or China? You're not going to get anything from that. I said, I'm going to put a 100, 200, or 300. I'm going to put the highest tariff in history, meaning I'm going to stop them from ever selling a car into the United States. So I just see the guy by accident. I see him. He says, sir, they've abandoned it. And by the way, they built foundations. They were really rocking. They were going to do it. They thought that I was going to win, or maybe they just told him up. I tell you this, if I don't win, those factories are going to wipe out this country. They're the biggest factories ever built for cars. They're going to wipe out our country. If she wins, and she doesn't know what the hell she's doing. If she wins, she's not going to be thinking about, I couldn't, every speech I made having to do with cars, but every speech I made having to do with tariffs, I'd mentioned that our country is being threatened by Mexico. Now, all of those things, beyond even the car companies, all of those things are now dead. They're dead. I asked them, will they start? Probably not. They're dead as a doornail.
All right, so we can leave it there. You definitely get the picture. Here's what Donald Trump posted today on Truth Social. He said, I hope everyone listened yesterday as Bloomberg interviewed me. For over a year, I've said China is building giant plants in Mexico. Since they heard about the tariffs, all work has stopped on those plants. I saved Michigan auto workers. Detroit will thrive if I'm elected. Okay, so we are supposed to believe that Donald Trump, definitely not president, through his threats, in the event that he wins a close fake election, that's going to get China to stop building auto manufacturing plants in Mexico. The possibility, the threat of tariffs under the possibility that Donald Trump might win a close fake election. And they stopped multi-million, billion-dollar projects for that? Really? Is that what they did? Or is all that stuff just already there and they know it's happening? It's either there or it's either coming or it's already arrived and we just don't know about it yet. Maybe Trump doesn't know what's happening on the executive committee, or maybe he does. Maybe he was just joking about the executive committee. Maybe it was just a euphemism, or maybe a bunch of things are going on that other people don't know about, most particularly Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Maybe Donald Trump doesn't know about some of these things either. It's possible. I don't think that's the case, but it's possible. Donald Trump seemed surprised that he had to run again. Do you remember that when he announced that he was running for president again? Like, oh, really? I have to go through and film another 2 years of this bullshit television show? He seemed a little surprised that he had to do that. He didn't seem very happy about it. People want the hose again. Believe it's all real. So I don't understand why countries would just stop. Major manufacturers would just stop building their plants where they intend to build cars and sell those cars into the U.S. auto market. They just stop because there's some chance that Donald Trump might win a close race and become president again and then implement the tariffs that he's threatening. Is that how things work? They're not looking out years in advance. They're going to just stop a project because he might win based on real votes. Is that how major members of the global regime and their partner organizations operate? I don't think it is. I don't think it is. I think that they would only pull back from something like that if it was a certainty. Because what do they care about? Wasting money? They invent the money. All right. So I believe that's most of what I wanted to talk about today. Oh, wait, one more clip. Here we are. Donald Trump, last clip from that same interview.
About this, Gavin Newsom, he's the governor of California.
Newsom.
He signed Newsom, I call him.
Yeah. But do you think?
No, he corrected me. He corrected me. I said, that's the first time I've been corrected.
There are CEOs out here. If they said those sort of things about a rival CEO, they'd be sacked. Do you think it's fine for a president? But they don't have to survive like me. They don't have to go through what I have to go through. There's never been a president that's been treated like me, so I have to fight my own way. Well, you made a very good job of.
He signed a bill in California 2 days ago that you don't even have the right to ask a person for voter ID. And if you ask a person for voter ID, of course you have to show voter ID. The only reason you wouldn't do, because they want to cheat. The bill says you cannot, it's against the law for you to ask a person, may I please see your voter ID when he votes? What is our country coming to?
Now, the fact that the interviewer tried to correct him on Newsom and then tried to scold him, saying there are CEOs in our audience, and if they ever talked like that about another CEO, they'd be sacked. Well, in America, we call that you're fired. That's, first of all, not true. It's, second of all, just a reputation ploy against Donald Trump's reputation in the party of false decorum dynamic. And this whole interview is like that. It's just example after example after example. He's trying to make Donald Trump look bad and look mean and look unsophisticated about these subjects, whereas he, the refined British man, is very sophisticated. So Donald Trump took it to his entire movement, the entire ideology, the entire global agenda. He called it out piece by piece by piece, and he steamrolled this interviewer, which a lot of people don't like, because they're like, why don't you just answer his questions? He's asking the questions. Why don't you just answer the questions? Well, why did they want Donald Trump to come here? To speak in front of the Economic Club. It's not the interviewer's event. It's the Economic Club's event. And they loved him. They were clapping. They were laughing. At the end, they gave him a standing ovation. I believe they gave him a standing ovation when he walked out, because I think the interviewer mentioned it. So they didn't come to see the interviewer slam Donald Trump and tell him how he's wrong about all these things. They didn't come to hear the interviewer talk and rattle off his statistics from his editorial boards, his newspapers, his economists. They came to hear Trump talk. They came to hear Trump say the things he wanted to say and make his pitch to a bunch of rich people who run businesses. I think they got what they wanted. The only person who didn't is the interviewer. Gavin Newsom is obviously awful. Trump is misstating the bill, or maybe he's talking about something that happened prior. The bill that Newsom just signed makes it illegal for even the localities in California to implement their own voter ID policies. It was already the case that they could not ask for ID. I took my ID out to vote in 2020, which I've told the story a number of times, not going to go through the whole thing. But she said, we're not allowed to check that. That was 2020. So what Trump just described is not new at all in California. But, you know, we'll take the narrative win. It's certainly relevant and correct. If people want to go fact check that and then say Donald Trump was wrong about California not needing to check voter ID, like that wasn't the law. That law is already in existence, but that wasn't the law. This law is actually even worse. Well, by all means, go ahead and fact check him. I guess I just fact checked him. That I should make that a new thing. Fact checking Donald Trump when the thing he says is actually much worse than he's saying it is. Okay, let's go to the Substack and I'll see what questions people might have. I know I sent the link out a little bit on the later side today, so maybe people didn't have the opportunity to ask questions. I will check the chat for rants and I will check the chat for questions if people have them. I've got about 20 or 30 more minutes that I can do this today. So I'll try to get through these quickly. Snowcat says, welcome to yet another lesson in situational awareness and trajectory analysis with your moderator. Thank you very much, sir. Dynamite, a story about the joys of being wrong. I was a neocon until 2015. As a Fox News junkie, I eventually realized there was something not genuine with the dual party dynamic. Very well done. After Romney and McCain, I began to see the uniparty for what it is. You spoke of Bill Kristol. I used to believe him. Where would I be if I was not wrong? I love the idea of Donald Trump and the possibilities of his presidency. This was the final act in my understanding of the ruse that is the uniparty. Man, I'm glad I was wrong. That is excellent, Danomite. I am in 100% agreement with you. I wish I had had that understanding in 2015 and not far later. I think it came to me as a Trump supporter easier than it did for other Trump supporters, because other Trump supporters were so emotionally invested in a long-term relationship with the Republican Party, and they've had to defend the Republican establishment so many times under the belief that they're the allies, that a lot of the arguments actually settle in and in some way become true for a person. You don't ever want to feel like you're lying. There are some people out there who lie all the time and have no problem with it because they like making money and the lies are necessary to keep making money. But you don't want to feel like a liar. So if you're saying things that aren't true, you will convince yourself that they are true so that you don't have to feel like a liar. And that's what a lot of people have done with both of the parties over the years, even though the parties don't actually stand for what they pretend to stand for. For me, I already hated the Republican establishment. I hated the neocons. So when I moved over to MAGA, I still hated the neocons. I understood why they were wrong. I actually tried to prove them right for a while. I was reading National Review and commentary regularly, listening to their podcasts. I spent 2 years doing that. And then I realized that they were lying too. So it wasn't hard for me to be like, oh yeah, there really is something wrong with these neocons and their agenda. That's separate. I look forward to when the rest of the Republican Party understands that. I think that most people do, and they just don't want to admit it because a lot of people are really scared and they accept that these allies might not be the best allies, but we need allies right now. We don't need allies right now. We are dominant. We are ascendant. There is nothing that can stop the trend that is happening. Okay. It's not even any of the planned stuff where nothing can stop what is coming. Nothing can stop the cultural trend, the directionality of what we're headed toward. The only way you could do that is with some extraordinarily violent long-term event, like a World War II, for instance, as if that's not what these world wars are. Because people don't just realize these things in one country at a time. But yeah, nothing can stop that. And so we don't actually need allies on a long enough timeline, knowing that the culture is headed in a certain direction, being able to tell it in our own lives, not from the television, not from polls, not from anything in the news cycle. In our own lives, we can see that people are waking up. That is going to keep happening. Knowing that is going to happen, you should be on the side of truth and stop groveling for terrible allies. And obviously, I'm not accusing any of you of that. I'm just making the point that this is how these situations should be responded to. We don't need these people. They are weak and stupid. I think I proved that fully during the Ron op. But maybe not. Maybe it was all kayfabe. Even if it was, had to be handled. Are you a turtle says, no, I'm not a turtle, first off, as far as I know. One thing I'm curious about, why is the president drawing attention to Kamala's allergies and conjunctivitis? Those are such minor things, which obviously have nothing to do with her being a dingbat. I wonder what he's laying the groundwork for. Julian Gonzalez says they are sick people. I think there's more to it than that. I'm more than happy to answer that question. Donald Trump had a post about this on Monday. Let me see if I can find it easily. I know I posted it in. Yeah, perfect. Well, perhaps not perfect. What is that? I know that I posted Trump's post. Man, you just lose them sometimes. Usually I'm so good at finding my information quickly, and today I'm just off my game. Trump posted about Kamala Harris's conjunctivitis and other maladies, most of which are minor. I am led to believe at least that one of them can be caused. I'm not sure if it is the only way that it's caused. I'm not sure if it is a correlation that could imply a causation. It was just something I read, but I heard that these conditions can be called or caused by drinking too much, which people believe Kamala Harris. And so it's possible that he could have been communicating about that. But he's been talking about how Kamala Harris needs a cognitive test. Here is his from Monday. It's a series of posts, but this is the important one for this conversation. As to her completely desperate request for my medical statements, she is dying to see my cholesterol, which is 180. I have already provided them many times, including quite recently, and they were flawless. However, I have just seen Kamala's report, and it is not good. According to her doctor's report, she suffers from urticaria, defined as a, quote, rash of round red welts on the skin that itch intensely, sometimes with dangerous swelling, end quote. She also has allergic rhinitis and allergic conjunctivitis, a very messy and dangerous situation. These are deeply serious conditions that clearly impact her functioning. Maybe that is why she can't answer even the simplest of questions asked by 60 Minutes and others. What is this all about? I don't have these problems. So, who knows if Kamala Harris has any of those conditions? If Donald Trump has seen her medical report, I don't know. If they are caused by drinking, then fine. Maybe that's what he's pointing at. Otherwise, I think it's just to offset the claims that Donald Trump needs to release a report on his cholesterol. And Kamala Harris is out there every day saying that Donald Trump is unhinged and he's continually acting more and more unstable, as if there's some mental decline going on causing all of this. So they talk about his health. They talk about his age. I think he's just hitting her back on that. I don't know. I mean, the first thing is just hives. Conjunctivitis, I thought, was pink eye that you get by, I guess, having fecal matter in your eye. So I don't know. I don't know. That's as good an explanation as I have for that. I think it provides some narrative cover. Maybe it makes people research or focus in on certain things with Kamala Harris. I cannot fully explain that one. I don't pretend to. I can guess at it. Maybe those were good guesses. Maybe they're not. That is for the eye of the beholder, the eye of Eric Holder. Let me see if there are any Kamala clips out yet. Oh, we are there. Oh, we are there. Let's do just about 10 minutes or so on this, and then I've got to take off. Gosh, what fun we're going to have. Maybe. I doubt there's any way, but maybe tomorrow I'll talk about this too on the podcast, if anything in this interview is actually worth discussing. But I'm not going to just be worried about missing out on or ruining my show tomorrow, I should say. Donald Trump is also in with Peter Bet David. So we will see how that goes. I'm just grabbing a couple of clips here today. My mind is just everywhere. Maybe some days your brain's just not good at multitasking. I'm usually pretty good at that. Okay. Kamala Harris on Bret Baier.
Exhausted of Brett.
More than 70% of people tell the country is on the wrong track. They say the country is on the wrong track. If it's on the wrong track, that track follows 3.5 years of you being vice president and President Biden being president. That is what they're saying, 79% of them. Why are they saying that? If you're turning the page, you've been in office for 3.5 years.
And Donald Trump has been running for office.
But you've been the person holding the office.
Come on.
Madam
You
Vice
and I
President.
both know what I'm talking about. You and I both know what I'm talking about.
I actually don't. What are you talking about?
What I'm talking about is that over the last decade,
But
people
you're the
have
lever of
become.
power.
But listen, over the last decade, it is clear to me, and certainly the Republicans who are on stage with me.
Wow. That's really bad. By the way, she's talking about this today. Republicans rally with Harris as she calls Trump unhinged. And they're talking about like Adam Kinzinger, former Trump aides. And of course, CNN now does this thing where no clear leader in presidential race. Latest CNN poll of polls finds. Wow, man, 50-49. Kamala Harris is up. Wait till they show her at 51. These people are insane. I guess some people still believe this. They're going with the turn the page and the frankly exhausted. Oh man, they're advertising that very clip we just watched. That's incredible. My presidency will not be a continuation of Joe Biden's presidency. Man, they're not going to tell us who else was with Kamala Harris today. It was Kinzinger and some Trump aides. So I don't know exactly who. That is one really, really bad answer. And she tried to do the laugh thing. She's trying to do the body language. She's trying to tell Brett Baier, like, hey, we're on the same side. Let me off easy on this one. You and I both know what we're talking about. She's like trying to drill it into his head so that he feels like he's on the spot and has to nod and agree and move on. That's how that trick works. And it usually does work. They're very good at it. Well, I should say it usually does work because they're often with extremely friendly media who is happy to go along with it. Brett Baier, for whatever reason, is not doing that. I guess he's trying to make Fox seem like they are fair and balanced, straight shooters about all this. If Kamala ends up being taken out and replaced either now or in the stages before a replacement election, if that is to be our destiny, man, they are really firming up their anti-Kamala cred with these questions. But I don't know how much of a mark this is going to leave, because some of this is stuff that people already know. It's going to be what everybody talks about in the podcast sphere tomorrow, the Con Inc. sphere, I mean, because all of this is done as we said earlier, as we showed earlier with Brett Baier, as I showed earlier, and we all saw. This is how my brain is sometimes. It's a close, tight race, the most razor-thin margin we have ever seen. And therefore, we need to focus all our energy on showing everybody how dumb Kamala Harris is. If we weren't pretending it was a close, tight race, we wouldn't need to spend our time, too much time, on Kamala Harris and how dumb she is. And that's why it's better to talk about this as to what's actually going on. What are we being presented with and why, rather than listen to Kamala's answer? Let's dissect her answer. Let's do another one.
About locking people up because they disagree with him. This is a democracy. And in a democracy, the president of the United States, in the United States of America, should be willing to be able to handle criticism without saying he'd lock people up for doing it.
Now, is that just unbridled panic? Maybe. That's amazing. The emoting is obviously inauthentic. I hope that all of you can see that. There's nothing behind that. She's not even telling the truth. If someone is emoting like that and they're not telling the truth that they will stand by and back up, she's just reciting sound bites and news headlines and hot takes. Those aren't even her ideas she's presenting. And she's trying to assert that she's passionate. Brett Baier is actually doing a wonderful thing here by just sitting there like with his very straight mouth, totally straight. He looks like that emoji with the straight mouth, just totally unaffected by Kamala's emoting. That's wonderful. All right, good stuff. I'm not mad at those clips. They're certainly going, it's not like they're bad in the information war, right? I'm not saying that. We just don't need to spend all day on these unless we are child brains. Rumble Rants, $5. Jay Gonzalez. This hammers home the ADL post from earlier today I shared with you. Yes, that was you. Thank you very much for highlighting that. Thank you very much for sending that my way. I don't believe I ever saw that before. And if I did, I forgot about it and didn't properly contextualize it, because I think that that's kind of a big deal. So thank you for sending that. I agree. I think I addressed that in conversation and don't need to comment further. But thank you. Starborn, $5. Chris, I shared some links to interview clips in the latest Telegram post. The whole interview was only 25 minutes long, had some funny moments. Oh man, I'm sorry. Okay, so there's a Telegram post. I'm going to check those out. Thank you so much for sending those. I got a couple. All right. Starborn says it's hilarious. The clips are gold. Starborn, if you want to send me one more in the next minute, I will do that and put it up. And otherwise, I'm going to have to get out of here and then process the show so that I can post it as a podcast before I have a dinner in half an hour. So, Saad this says, I posted a question on Substack. If you have time, let me look really quick. I can't promise you I'm going to have a lot of time for it. If it is complex, we might have to save it for next week. The question is, my attempt to post a longer thought got eaten. Too long, didn't read. I'm struggling with assessing historical facts. Not everything is fake, but assessing what is true is absolutely perilous. How do you approach this? Well, I don't think you can take it for granted that not everything is fake. I don't believe you can take that for granted at all. You should assume that everything could possibly be fake. That aside, we don't need to get into that, okay? That aside, I know you were watching last night during Badlands Story Hour, and I think that that's probably what has led you to this question. What I try to do is understand that the pattern repeating now has repeated for a long time. And if that pattern repeats, then the important part of that pattern repeating is the different narrative storyline elements, the beats in the elongated story, okay? And as somebody who's studied screenwriting a lot, and Burning Bright has written novels, that's why we talk about these things in the way we talk about them, because we're understanding all of these things as story elements, because that's how they come to us. The history of the French Revolution does not come to us as the French Revolution. It comes to us as a series of stories told about the French Revolution from a certain perspective and then revised over time to emphasize a certain agenda and a certain role as good and bad. And that story corresponds directly to ours. It is the exact same story in terms of the beats. The details are different. In every romantic comedy, there is a moment that they call meet cute. Okay? And that is the first time that the two love interests in the romantic comedy will ever come across one another. And there are, various different ways to play this. In the movie Her, for instance, the meet cute moment is the first time that the Joaquin Phoenix character is using his AI assistant and developing an affection for her. Now, that's a very unorthodox meet cute moment. In the simple form, it is just the two main love interests first coming together. Okay? That story beat is always going to be there, no matter what the two characters look like, no matter what their roles are. And I've just described an alternative role. That is a story beat that will have different details, but will exist in every romantic comedy. So they have these story beats that are standard for horrors or for action movies or whatever. And these replicate themselves in every movie. And if you watch a bunch of movies with the story beats involved or in mind, you can pick them out as you go through the story and recognize, that's that beat. That beat exists in all of these. And if you know the beat has to exist, then you can look in the movie structure and say, oh, there it is. Okay. So if you do that with history in the exact same way, which is what I do, then it can lead you to all sorts of new insights about what roles which characters had and what it means that they had them, and then what their motivations in those roles would have been, and then assess what the history says about the events that have happened. Because if you can go back through that history to primary sources from that time, after having understood the opposite should be true in this element, 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 and you can find primary sources from that time suggesting that that is actually what happened at the time, you can be pretty damn sure you have found an accurate reading of history. And so that is how I approach it. And it has paid off in spades as far as I'm concerned. People can think I'm crazy. I'm able to tell stories that link everything across all of these revolutions, across the entire world, including ours, which is not exactly what we were told it was. Doesn't mean we can't make it what we were told it was. Doesn't mean we can't make it good. Just means that it wasn't that way. We can find contemporary histories written at those times and alternative histories that are written since then and understand that actually this alternative point of view has something to it. It was backed up by primary sources. And if we just understand that these motivations are not how history has revised them to be, then we can be pretty sure that those people were telling the truth about what they saw at the time, and we should heed what those people are saying. And instead, we deny it because we think that we have learned history well enough. So I think that that is probably the best I can explain that. That is what I always try to do when we're doing a historical film on Badlands Story Hour. That is what I try to do when I'm researching color revolutions, because it's, again, that's that same story pattern playing out in real time in other parts of our world. We're being told it right now by the regime, and there are people telling the opposite. We can witness it in real time. All we have to do is take that same thing and port it back through time, and we can come to terms with those stories as well. This is the informational time machine at work, unwinding the past, okay? We can do it in our own lives, as I've explained at long length. We can also do it, the same process, in the past. I think I just gave the best explanation for how I do that I can. And if I am able to think of things that I missed and need to clarify, I will do that. If you think there are things that I missed and need to clarify, I will do that as well. Brain Strain again just said, Gangs of New York on Story Hour analysis was a revelation. It was a revelation going through that analysis for me as well. And to pair that with Our Secret Constitution by George Fletcher provided me untold insight into an event that is drilled into our heads in a wrong way. And we know that. And I believe the same is true for the transfer agreement when it comes to World War II and Nazi Germany and the partnership of Zionists and Nazis. We're told something like that is impossible. It's not impossible. It's a historical fact. So we did that last night with the French Revolution and, more accurately, Napoleon's times. And we'll do that about plenty more films. I assume I will continue doing it about the color revolutions around the world, the good twin, evil twin dynamic, and through whatever historical events I find myself needing to dig into. War of 1812 and the Russian Revolution are on my list. The French Revolution, much more of that is on my list. You can find the same people funding and organizing all these things. It's probably about time we paid attention. So with that, I'm going to wrap things up here. Thank you all very much, so much for hanging out. And yeah, so I will be back tomorrow at the same reasonable time on the same reasonable podcast network. I do not have a network. Masks and lockdowns don't work. They lied to you about a pandemic. And Joe Biden will never be president.
Well, what? You know who I am, don't you?
Well, you ain't Fiona Apple, and if you ain't Fiona Apple, I don't give a rat's ass.
Ah!
I will not let you down.
We do a little trolling. It's called We Do a Little Trolling.
What? In my mind, that's the end game.
If you're listening for free and would like to support the show, the best way to do that is by signing up for a paid subscription at imyourmoderator.substack.com. You can find the info stream over on Telegram at t.me/veryreasonable. The merch site is cancelcouture.com. And for all my other links, you can visit linktree.com/imyourmoderator. And I'll see you soon down on the range.